Okay, so I know who you are because you and your mom are my favorites, but can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Okay, well, my name's Laura Kemshall and I'm an artist. I work a lot with textiles. I use a lot of stitch, print, painting, drawing in my work.
Okay, and how do you describe yourself as a maker?
I just say I'm an artist because I like something that encompasses everything. I never like to pin myself down to doing any one thing because I usually get bored quite quickly and then I stop doing it. And so if I label myself as something, it won't stay that label for long. So I just say artist and then you can get away with doing anything you want.
Okay, and this is what we're here for. We want to talk about threads. So what do you love to create with Madeira thread?
Well, whenever I'm doing any textile work, it has a lot of stitch on it. So I quilt things on the whole, although I do embroidery, but it's always through a quilt, or nearly always. See, I've just broken the rule already. That's why I can't say I'm an embroiderer. Well, usually when I'm stitching, I work through the 3 layers that are a quilt, so top fabric, wadding and backing. But I put a lot of stitch in so that sometimes you could describe it as being on the verge of it being embroidered because there's such a lot of thread on the surface. So I combine the stitch with other techniques. So I do a lot of printing, painting, I do some piecing, but I put a lot of stitching, which is why the thread's important, because you're able to add colour with that stitch. So it's a bit like a painter adds an extra glaze of paint over the top. That's what you can do with your thread when you put down enough closely spaced lines of stitching. It adds like an extra dimension of colour.
Absolutely. Okay, and so let's take a step out of the creative story for a moment and talk about what do you bring to the world with your creative business?
Oh, okay. That sounds like a big, heavy question.
It is.
Well, Linda and I have taught together for a long amount of time now. I'm not even going to think about how many years it is. She might remember, but it's a lot. And we've taught online. So we work in our studios and we film what we're doing. So we try and keep it really authentic and real. And we just tell everybody how to do the things that we love to do. And we hope that that really helps inspire people to be creative and achieve what they want to do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So you are known for creating pieces that have layers of depth and a lot of meaning. So how does Madeira thread add to the mix?
I think it is just to do with that amount of stitch, and it is about see, I have 2 sides to the work that I do. So I like to draw and I like to paint. And then I like to make things with textiles too. And sometimes it can be hard to reconcile those 2 things because they can be quite different, even though there's one person making it and it links them together. Yeah. But if you think about your quilting line, and I know Linda will say the same, your quilting line is like a drawing line. So when you're somebody who just naturally draws all the time, even just explaining something to you, I feel like I could tell you a lot better if I was holding a pencil. Yeah. Then when I think about my stitched work, that line of stitching is doing the same job. So when I put together a quilt or any kind of textile piece, it might look quite undone for a long time until you get sufficient stitching in, because the stitching is like adding that drawn layer. So the colour and the line gives you the drawing as well. And obviously with the thread, I choose colours that are very strident and strong or very graphic, because that links back to the drawing and the painting that I do.
So is there a Madeira thread that you've really been loving lately that you use the most?
Well, I think it's quite amusing from my point of view is that I'm not actually a very good brand ambassador because I don't use all the threads and I don't know about all of the threads, because when I'm choosing a thread, I choose it for 2 reasons. What colour is it and how thick is it? And those are really the only things you need to know, because you can make everything work, and it depends. You don't even have to use a thread for the purpose that it's designed for. You can use it because it gives you the effect that you want it to use. So at the moment I'm using a lot of these very, very bright fluorescent threads, which might put you in mind of like high-vis safety wear. Yeah. And maybe that's what they were designed for rather than for artwork. But you know, when you are stitching a line of thread, you know, you see a big spool of thread like that and it looks a big blocky amount of colour, and you think that's horrible. That's too bright for me, I don't use those colours. But you have to imagine that when you're using it in stitch and you take just a single line of it, it's so diluted that you very rarely, unless you're putting down huge amounts of surface embroidery, you very rarely see that much of any single thread. Usually, as a quilter certainly, you only see that single line. So you need to choose things that are way brighter and way bolder than you first give yourself credit for. So although these really bright fluorescent ones look a little bit eye-watering when you see them on the spool, when you see them in use, actually they give you just that right injection of punchy colour that you need. So yes, I've been using these an awful lot lately.
Yeah, and so those threads are called frosted matte.
Yes, that's how good an ambassador I am.
And they have, the interesting thing about those threads is that they're polyester, but they have a touch of ceramic in it. So what is that flatness? What does it mean to you in your quilting?
Well, sometimes you would want to use a thread that's very reflective and shiny, like a rayon. But sometimes that matte quality is what you're looking for. Yeah. So again, it's just about right thread for right moment. So I'm not saying that I would always use a matte thread, because I don't. Sometimes I do use the shinier ones. But for these at the moment, that flat, kind of basic way of putting the colour down is really working quite nicely. I've got a lot of other things going on, so I don't actually need the shine from the thread. Yeah, sure.
Can you show us a couple of the ways that you'd use that thread?
Yeah, so in this cushion here, this is a digital embroidery that I've designed. So the lettering, that's my handwriting that I've digitized, and it's stitched out in satin stitch. And again, it's worked through a quilt layer. So instead of you getting that sort of embroidered surface, you get much more of a quilted surface. It adds texture as well as colour. And you can see these are some of the colours that I've used here. So I am putting down quite a bit of thread on these because it's not just a single running stitch line, it's a satin stitch line, so it is bolder. And these obviously fully satin stitched in. So that's one of the ways that I've been using it. I like it when you get these little moments where you get two layers working on top of each other, little bits popping through.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. And it looks like you've taken your own handwriting and digitized it into your work.
Well, in my sketchbooks I do a lot of note taking and writing and just putting thoughts down, and text is a nice thing to use in your work, and digitizing it into stitch is something that's really quite effective. But if I show you in this piece here as well, you can see areas like this. I mean, my background colours here are quite muted, so I've gone in with a very bright thread choice, and it really lifts the surface. If you'd have quilted that in the same pink tone as the background, it would have stayed quite flat, where it's much nicer. Look at all this here that's working. It's because you've used a real pop of colour with the thread. So this is a really important decision. I think sometimes people play safe and they just, oh, that's my cat getting up. Ben. Sometimes people play safe and they pick a colour, a thread colour that matches their background fabric, especially if you're a beginner and you're worried that your quilting line isn't going to be perfect, so you want it to blend, you don't want it to stand out. But honestly, it's much more fun if it stands out because you can do so much more with it.
Yeah. Now, if there was a thread tip that you had, for like one thread tip that you could give people watching right now, what would it be?
It would be to be confident with your thread choices. Yeah. Don't always play safe. Look at the threads that you've got and think about what you could add that would be a bit spicier. You know, when you're cooking, you don't want it all to be bland and boring. You want a little bit of chili. So I would say just choose one thread that can be your little bit of chili in your work.
What a great tip. Okay, so if you could only say one thing, like when you're teaching, what is one really important tip that you give in your workshops and things like that?
Oh, I hope I give loads more tips than just one thing. I give lots of advice depending on the student and what they already know and what they want to achieve, but ignore everybody else and just do what you want to do, really, and make sure the work is yours. And with the students that I'm working at the moment, that's what we're really working on, finding out what they want to say with their work and how they're going to say it, and not to try and do anything that I would do. I can help them find ways with techniques, but really the work should be their own, and that's always what we would want to encourage.
Yeah, such great advice. Okay, we're winding down, but I want to ask you, this has been a wonderful journey for you in your life, your artistic journey. So what are you most proud of?
Just doing what I wanted to do and not being scared to try things. I think I could have had a more comfortable, easier life doing things that I know how to do. I get bored, and I realise when I look back over the things that I've done that I've always spent my life, and I still do, living on the edge of what I know and what I don't know. And I am always learning about what it is that I want to do next. So So I guess maybe that means that I've never got perfect at doing anything, because as soon as I get okay at it, I want to move on to the next thing. And that is how I've lived my life, really.
Yeah, so great. When you're doing something that has a bit of fear in it, that probably means you're doing the right thing, right?
It's just more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
If you know how it's going to end up by tea time, there's not much point doing it. I'd rather go into the studio not knowing and see what happens.
Okay, so what's coming up soon for you? Do you have some big events coming up?
I have 2 exhibitions that I'm working to at the moment, where I'm creating some new work. One of them is new work and one is retrospective. So quite exciting. Lots of time in the studio doing lots of hours of stitching. All of this, as you know, takes a lot of time.
Yeah. Okay, so let's end with where people can find you. You have so many wonderful courses available online. So tell us the website where people can go to learn from you, and then where can we find you on the socials?
Best place to go is just go to my website, which is laurakemshall.com, and everything is linked from there. So if you know my name, then you'll find me. So just type Laura Kemshall into your search engine, or laurakemshall.com will take you straight there. And from there, well, you can look at all my work on my website. You can head to my newsletter, which Linda and I write together. It's a free weekly newsletter, our socials and our courses as well. So if you'd like to learn a little bit more about what we do, you'll find it all from there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing some bits of your story today.
You're welcome. Thanks.